Britain was subject to rapid change throughout the 18th century, namely as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution. The gap between the upper and working classes widened as poverty became widespread. This coincided with a rising population. The slump of the mid-17th century was succeeded by a rapid increase to a total population of 7 million by 1781. A large mass of people, estimated to be a third of one half of the population, struggled to survive on inadequate incomes. It is unsurprising, therefore, that there was a massive increase in crime from the 1770s onwards, which is mostly accounted for by the offences against property. Dangerous living conditions, insufficient wages, and the privatisation of land all contributed to the growing desperation of the nation's poor. Property crimes such as poaching and petty theft became a way to survive. The 1717 Transportation Act had meant that convicts serving their sentences overseas was not a recent phenomenon. It had not been done, however, on such a large scale. These criminals were banished because the legal system could not bring itself to execute the vast number of convicts who had qualified for capital punishment. This further illustrates the decline of British society, and as so many were driven to crime as a means of survival.
This was a national problem and affected people of poor working classes worst, including women called Mary Bryant. Born in Fowey, Cornwall, Mary was in dire poverty and trying to escape this poverty moved to Plymouth. However, here she was a victim of circumstance too. Unable to find work, she went into poverty and inevitably then turned to crime. She was caught as a highwayman stealing a bonnet and a few coins, and for those crimes she was sentenced to 7 years transportation. This in itself is a perfect testament to the justice system at the time, and how warped it was, and how biased it was against people with poor working class backgrounds.
This is Bodmin Jail. This is where the majority of captives and convicts were kept before being shipped overseas to Botany Bay.
To the limits, we were learning quicker by 11, drinking, burning, never rich, so we were out to make that steady figure. Once I was 11 years old, my daddy told me, go get yourself a wife or you'll be lonely.
Mary Bryant throughout her life proved to be tenacious and resilient. Her situation, however, was by no means unique. The established social order in Britain meant that poverty in this century was unavoidable. Some contemporaries even believed that the poor brought hardships upon themselves through failure and weakness in morality.
This attitude prevented poverty from being eradicated. There was no welfare state at the time. The situations of prisons at the time also added to the problem. Here in Bodmin Jail was nearly one of 500 prisons in Britain. Most were small, compact and served a limited purpose.
Under the Transportation Act, Mary should never have been sent away for her crimes. Initially, no women were ever sent away. However, by the time she stood trial in 1786, they were just sending people anyway.
Plymouth Sound was home to the Dunkirk, a Royal Navy ship no longer fit for purpose and sent here to be refurbished as a prison hulk. Prison hulks were where the majority of convicts were stored before they were transported away to Botany Bay. A prison hulk, much like the Dunkirk, was where Mary met her husband, William Bryant. William was serving on a prison hulk and had been serving 3 of his 7-year sentence on a hulk. Prison hulks were only meant to be a short-term solution before prisoners were sent away. However, the case of William Bryant disproves this entirely.
Not all convicts sentenced to transportation were so lucky. The programme was created partially as an alternative to housing convicts in costly British prisons, but this was not cheap. To save money, the cost-cutting Second Fleet in 1790 was contracted to a slave-trading firm, rather than William Richard's private company. The government paid £17, 7 shillings and 6 pence to ship each felon to New South Wales. The conditions were squalid. An officer of the New South Wales Corps wrote that, "The slave trade is unmerciful compared to what I have seen in this fleet. This is a far cry from the original level of dignity that the prisoners such as Mary and William are implied to have held during their sentence. Life in the colonies was tough and ultimately intended as a prison sentence. Convicts experienced a relative freedoms compared to life in prison, but were subject to harsh punishments. William worked as a fisherman, but in February 1789 was sentenced to 100 lashes for selling. William was suspected of plotting an escape, but on one particular night in February 1791, there was no moon to give the party away. There was an event that would make Mary Bryant famous in her lifetime. They successfully travelled 3,254 miles in 69 days to Copenhagen, crossing the Arthur Sea and discovering the island.
Home to her birthplace in Foy. The transportation of penal convicts to Australia didn't stop until the mid-18th century. It was the end of a dark chapter in British history. It was only used as a quick fix to solve Britain's rising crime rates. Mary Bryant's strength in the face of adversity is a testament to working class strength throughout this dark period of British history. We're here in Truro, next to a Shaw statue called Cornwall, where the drum beats differently. I think Mary Bryant's case is a perfect example of this drum beating differently.